have seen some ups and downs. Thank you.
Absolutely, sir. I do request you to stay on with us. Now, as you stated, the meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Trump is being closely watched, and the White House has confirmed that President Donald Trump will hold a bilateral meeting with Prime Minister Modi on the sidelines of the G7 summit, likely on either June 16th or 17th. This, of course, will be their first in-person interaction in over a year. Expected discussions include trade and economic ties, defense cooperation, energy, supply chains, technology and AI, immigration, H-1B visas, and regional security. The meeting comes as both sides work to further strengthen the India-US strategic partnership. With that, let's take a trip down memory lane and look at some previous meetings of Prime Minister Modi and President Trump, with this one, of course, coming after at least more than a year is what we're seeing. So what are other times that the two leaders have met earlier? Now, of course, you have the first meeting that took place on 26th of June 2017, and it mainly focused on counter-terror and defense. So that was the first meeting, of course, visuals of that as well, way back in 2017. Then they met on the 28th of June in 2019 in Osaka, Japan. Prime Minister Narendra Modi met Trump on the sidelines of the G20 summit. So the G20 summit in Japan is where this meeting took place in 2019 after their first meeting in 2017. They met again on 26th of August 2019 in France, with both leaders meeting on the sidelines of the G7 summit. So the 2019 G7 summit as well, after right on the heels of the G20 summit is where they met in France. 22nd of September 2019 in Houston, Texas. Of course, you had the Howdy Modi event, which showcased the strong India-US partnership. Visuals of that on your screens as well, of course. So in 2019, the third meeting is when the Howdy Modi event was hosted in Texas by the US President for Prime Minister Modi. Then on 24th September 2019, they met in New York, where the two leaders met at the UNGA and discussed trade, energy and security. So the fourth meeting in 2019 at the United Nations General Assembly in New York, right after the Howdy Modi event, was also hosted in Texas by the United States President. February 24th and 25th on 2020, and Ahmedabad as well as New Delhi, when the Namaste Trump event, which focused on defense and economic cooperation, which were the key points of focus, of course. So, of course, after the Howdy Modi event, you had the Namaste Trump event in India that was hosted in 2020. 13th February 2025 in Washington, D.C., where talks focused on trade, technology, defense and immigration. So that, in fact, was the last meeting between the two leaders in February 2025. Ambassador Sushil Kumar Singhal continues to be with us on the broadcast. Sir, of course, a slew of meetings between the two leaders that have taken place over the years. This one in particular, of course, is in focus because it comes after more than a year, with many important developments such as the tariff wars. You have the Pahalgam terror attack, you have Operation Sindoor, then of course you have the ongoing US-Iran conflict. So how do you take a look at this meeting, or in your opinion, or what are the key points to be discussed? Of course, US officials have said that trade is going to be a very, very important point on the agenda. So what do you think can be the key outcomes from this bilateral engagement?
Well, as you rightly mentioned, this is a seventh meeting, but all other six meetings happen in a very different kind of atmosphere. But this meeting, which is going to take place on Tuesday or Wednesday, is very significant because of the frictions which arose between the two sides. After Pahalgam, we know that President Trump took credit for stopping the war between India and Pakistan, which India set the record straight, telling that the US has no role. Then, of course, we had this imposition of sanctions and also the tariff, and now Iran war and incident which has taken place. So this meeting, that is why this has become very significant, because this meeting will take place in totally different circumstances. That is why we all will be looking at the optics, how these two leaders meet, and of course, a discussion. Discussion is going to be very important, because apart from other issues, as you rightly mentioned, the trade. I think trade issue agreement which is being discussed. I think this will be very important, because US is also very keen to finalize this agreement as soon as possible. But President Trump has certain expectations, and so he will try to convince Prime Minister Modi to include what his concerns are. And same thing will happen with the Prime Minister. We'll also discuss the area of concerns from India. So I think that is why we are saying that trade discussion will take place. Secondly, this West Asia crisis, because India has been very adversely impacted with this crisis, ongoing crisis, energy prices have gone up. We are scrambling to source supplies. So I think there will be an in-depth discussion on that what is the way forward in view of US. And I think Prime Minister Modi will also will also express concerns of India, and also maybe will I think will advise him to follow the path of dialogue, so that this crisis is controlled now, because it has already lingered on for so many months, and whole global economy is impacted. Asia Pacific, will also be, I think, will be under discussion, and I think President Trump will be brief about his China visit, and also talk about the India's role in that. Because, and maybe the Quad, nobody is talking about the Quad, but I think the Quad, when we are talking of Indo-Pacific, the Quad also will be discussed along with that. And the defense technologies, because India has become a major partnership, where we have a major partnership with US in defense areas. So I think there are some lingering issues which will be, I think, discussed, so that they can guide the officials to carry them forward. And it meets the President Trump's requirement also, because he wants to increase exports to India, and India is also willing to import technologies and required items. So I think that will be another area of interest for President Trump. So I think it's going to be very, very important, and it will set the role, or I think tone, for next 2 years of the presidency of President Trump.
Absolutely, sir, but one cannot speak about this bilateral engagement without mentioning the latest development that has taken place, which of course is the death of 3 Indian sailors in US strikes in the Strait of Hormuz. So how do you see that playing out, and how important will it be? Because while India did lodge protest, the United States has basically said that, the commercial ships should be complying with US orders as they work to maintain security in the Hormuz. So how important do you think that will be in the discussion between the United States President and Prime Minister Modi?
I think India has already lodged protest. The CDA was called twice, and Prime Minister, our External Affairs Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, has already spoken to Mark Rubio. And what I understand, Rubio, of course, the readout was slightly different. That they didn't talk about completely all the information. But what I understand, the assurance was given from the US side that they will inquire, examine why, how, and why it happened. So, but of course, the readout is that they said that they should have followed. And one point I would like to make here, slightly, which I think it does not come into the attention. These 3 ships which were attacked, of course, they were civilian ships, apparently are allegedly coming from carrying the Iranian oil, which sanctions, the blockade has been put by US. These ships were not registered in India. They were not Indian ships. 2 were from Palau, and I think 1 was from Guinea-Bissau. So these ships were registered in that country. Only thing with difference is that Marines were managing. So Indians were on the ship, and unfortunately, 3 Indians were killed in that, and some were injured. So it was not an Indian ship. They were not Indian ships. But just because Indian citizens were involved, we have not this protest. So that's I just wanted to make the record, keep the record straight on that. So secondly, I think there will be it's quite likely because there is a lot of outrage in India. Prime Minister may raise this point and mention it to President Trump, and that this incident happened, and as I was saying, beginning that the Prime Minister would advise that they should President Trump should follow the path of dialogue and ensure that the state of Hormuz is opened as soon as at the earliest, so the global energy crisis, which everybody is suffering from, is controlled at least in the short term and removed in the longer term. So I think this will be that.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us and sharing your